One thing you have to understand about men is this: comfort can become dangerous. Not dangerous in a violent way, not dangerous in a dramatic way, but dangerous in a quiet, invisible way. When a man gets comfortable, he stops stretching, he stops proving, he stops chasing. And when he stops chasing, he can slowly stop appreciating. A lot of women don't realize that when a man feels secure, when he believes you're not going anywhere, his urgency changes. In the beginning, he calls more, he texts faster, he shows up early, he plans things, he listens closely. Why? Because in the beginning, he's not sure he has you. And when he's not sure, he operates at his highest level. But once he sees that you forgive quickly and stay consistently, something subtle shifts inside him. The pressure to win you eases. The drive to impress relaxes. The fear of losing you fades. And when the fear of losing you fades, appreciation can fade with it. Comfort makes him assume access. Comfort makes him think tomorrow is guaranteed. Comfort makes him believe that even if he slips, you'll still be there. So he postpones growth. He delays change. He underestimates the impact of his behavior. Not always because he's malicious, but because human nature takes steady presence for granted. Think about it. When you see something every day, you stop staring at it. When something is always available, you stop valuing its rarity. That's not just about relationships, that's about psychology. The more accessible something feels, the less urgent it becomes. Complacency doesn't start with disrespect. It starts with small relaxations. He calls you back a little later. He stops planning thoughtful dates. He assumes you'll understand. He assumes you'll wait. He assumes you'll tolerate. And assumptions are the beginning of emotional laziness. A man in comfort mode doesn't wake up thinking, I'm going to take her for granted today. No. It happens gradually. He gets used to your kindness, used to your loyalty, used to your presence, used to you handling things, used to you being the stable one. And when someone becomes a stable one, they often become invisible in their strength. That's why comfort creates complacency, because he stops measuring your value daily. He stops asking himself, what if she leaves? And when that question disappears, so does urgency. Men are naturally wired to respond to challenge, not chaos, not drama, but challenge. When something requires effort, it feels meaningful. When something requires growth, it feels earned. And when something feels earned, it feels valuable. If you remove challenge entirely, if you accept everything, forgive everything, tolerate everything, without consequence, you unintentionally remove the pressure that keeps him sharp. You unintentionally tell him, no matter what you do, I'll remain. When a woman has clear standards, when she communicates expectations, calmly but firmly, when she is loving but not desperate, she maintains a healthy tension in the relationship. Not fear but awareness. Awareness that she chooses him. Awareness that her presence is intentional, not automatic. Complacency also grows when gratitude isn't reinforced. If he doesn't experience consequences for low effort, he can normalize low effort. If he doesn't feel the emotional distance that comes from disappointing you, he may not register the seriousness of his actions. If nothing changes when he falls short, if the energy stays the same, the access stays the same, the affection stays the same, his brain reads that as acceptable. Not ideal, but acceptable. And acceptable becomes the new standard. That's why sometimes when a woman finally leaves, the man is shocked. Not because he didn't see the signs, but because he didn't feel the consequences building up in real time. He thought everything was fine because everything looked stable. You might have communicated. You might have cried. You might have explained your needs over and over. But if your actions never align with your words, if you stayed every time, he may have heard you emotionally but not understood you behaviorally. And here's what's powerful. When you finally remove your presence, when you finally shift the pattern, when the comfort he relied on disappears, that's when complacency gets exposed. That's when he realizes the cost of his assumptions. That's why maintaining a sense of value within a relationship is so important. Not by playing games, not by threatening to leave every week, but by having boundaries that mean something, by allowing your energy to shift when you're not treated properly, by not overcompensating when he underperforms. The strongest love doesn't come from comfort alone. It comes from conscious choice. It comes from waking up and still deciding to show up fully. It comes from knowing you could lose something valuable and choosing to protect it. Absence has a way of doing what presence cannot. When you are constantly in someone's life, calling, texting, supporting, forgiving, your value can blend into the background of their routine. It becomes familiar, predictable, expected. And when something becomes expected, the mind stops examining it closely. But when that same presence disappears, when the phone no longer lights up with your name, when the emotional support is no longer automatic, the silence becomes loud. And in that silence, clarity begins. Most men don't process emotions in real time the way women often do. While you are expressing concerns, explaining feelings, asking for change, he may hear you, but he doesn't fully feel the weight of it. Not because he doesn't care, but because nothing in his environment has shifted enough to force deep reflection. As long as you remain, as long as access to you is uninterrupted, his brain registers stability. Stability can trick him into believing everything is manageable. But when you leave, the pattern breaks. When the routine is disrupted, his mind is forced into awareness. Humans are highly responsive to loss. Psychologically, loss creates more emotional intensity than gain. Losing something triggers deeper reflection than simply having something. When you're gone, he doesn't just miss your presence, he feels the absence of what you provided. He starts noticing the small things, the way you checked on him, the way you remembered details, the way you softened his stressful days. When those details vanish, comparison begins. He interacts with other people and realizes the emotional depth isn't the same. The patience isn't the same. The loyalty isn't the same. And comparison sharpens clarity. Absence removes distraction. When you're there, he may be focused on work, friends, stress, ego, pride. When you're gone, those distractions fade into quiet moments. Late at night, early in the morning, during milestones, during difficulties. That's when he replays conversations. That's when he rethinks arguments. That's when he questions his own behavior. He begins to see patterns he ignored before. He sees how often you compromised, how often you adjusted, how often you tried. And without you there to balance things out, he has nothing to counter that realization. He can't blame the argument on your tone when there is no argument anymore. He can't distract himself with temporary comfort when the emotional void keeps resurfacing. And the deeper truth is this: when someone is no longer accessible, their value increases in the mind. Scarcity changes perception. What felt ordinary becomes rare. What felt replaceable becomes unique. When he believed you were always going to be there, he didn't have to calculate your worth carefully. Now that you're not there, every memory feels amplified. He may also experience ego resistance at first. Pride might delay realization. He may try to distract himself. Date someone new. Stay busy. Act unaffected. But unresolved emotions don't disappear, they resurface when the noise fades. And when the surface distractions lose their excitement, the comparison returns. It doesn't always hit on day one. Sometimes it builds slowly. A reminder here, a memory there. A moment where he needs advice and instinctively reaches for his phone, then remembers he can't call you. That moment stings. That's when understanding deepens. Absence also removes emotional dependency that he didn't recognize. Sometimes a man doesn't realize how much he relied on your emotional strength until he has to regulate himself alone. You might have been his encourager, his stabilizer, his voice of reason. When that support disappears, he feels the weight of managing alone, and that weight teaches him your impact. There's another layer to absence that's powerful. When you leave with dignity, without chaos, without revenge, without desperation, you leave behind unanswered emotional energy. You don't give him closure through arguments. You give him silence, and silence invites introspection. Absence also tests his feelings without influence. When you're present, affection can be fueled by habit, attraction, or routine. When you're absent, what remains is what's real. If he still thinks about you when there's no contact, no convenience, no physical closeness that reveals depth, that's when he understands whether his attachment was surface level or substantial. He might realize he wasn't just comfortable, he was connected. He wasn't just passing time, he was building something. And because he didn't see it clearly while you were there, the The contrast of your absence sharpens his awareness. This doesn't mean every man will respond the same way. Some will suppress clarity, some will ignore it. But many will feel it deeply, even if they don't immediately admit it. The realization may not always lead to reconciliation, but it often leads to growth. When you are always there explaining your worth, he doesn't have to discover it. When you remove yourself, he has to discover it on his own. And self-discovered truth is more powerful than repeated reminders. The moment he understands what you truly meant to him is often the moment he feels the gap you left behind. And that gap becomes the space where deeper love forms, not from convenience, not from comfort, but from awareness. Respect is the foundation that holds love together. Without respect, love becomes unstable. It becomes emotional, dramatic, inconsistent. A man can feel attraction without respect. He can feel attachment without respect, but he cannot sustain deep, lasting love without it. And one of the strongest ways respect is built is when a woman honors her own boundaries. When you decide to walk away because your standards were not being met, something shifts in a man's perception, not immediately always. Sometimes his ego reacts first. Sometimes pride masks the impact. But underneath that surface reaction, a message is being delivered clearly. She values herself. When you stay through everything, broken promises, repeated disappointments, lack of effort, you may believe you are proven loyalty. But if your loyalty comes at the cost of your dignity, a man can subconsciously lose admiration. He may appreciate your presence, but he doesn't feel the weight of potentially losing you. Without that weight, urgency fades. And when urgency fades, so can intentional effort. A boundary says, I care about you, but I care about myself too. It says, I am willing to love you, but I am not willing to abandon myself to do it. That energy is powerful. It shifts the dynamic from dependency to choice. For many men, that moment is a turning point because now he is no longer dealing with emotions he can negotiate or delay. He is dealing with consequences, and consequences demand reflection. Respect deepens when a man realizes you cannot be manipulated by temporary apologies. If every apology used to reset the relationship, he may have unconsciously. Learn that minimal effort restores full access. But when you break that cycle, when you no longer accept surface level fixes for deeper issues, he is forced to evaluate his behavior more seriously. If his actions lead to no change, he may not feel pressure to change himself. But when his actions lead to losing you, the seriousness becomes undeniable. It's no longer a conversation, it's a reality. Walking away with dignity is different from walking away in chaos. When you leave screaming, threatening, attacking, he can focus on your behavior. He can justify his own shortcomings by pointing at your reaction. But when you leave calmly, firmly, without degrading yourself, there is nothing for him to deflect onto. The mirror is placed directly in front of him. He begins to see that you were not dependent on him for identity. You were with him because you wanted to be, not because you needed to be. That distinction matters. Desire commands more respect than dependency ever will. Respect is tied to strength, not hardness, not coldness, but strength of character. The strength to say, I deserve consistency. The strength to say, I won't compete for basic treatment. The strength to accept temporary loneliness rather than permanent dissatisfaction. Sometimes while you were present, he may have confused your patience for weakness. He may have assumed your forgiveness meant tolerance without limits. But when your limit finally appears and you enforce it, his perception adjusts. He sees that your kindness was a choice, not a lack of options. He understands that you could leave and you did. That means your presence was never guaranteed. It was intentional. And intentional love feels different than convenient love. Boundaries also clarify value. When you accept everything, he may unconsciously place you in the category of secure and permanent. But when you demonstrate that your standards are non-negotiable, you move into a different category, valuable and selective. A man deeply respects a woman who respects herself, even if he struggles with it initially, even if his pride resists it, even if he tells himself he doesn't care. Internally, he recognizes strength when he sees it. Respect is also connected to challenge. Not games, but standards that require him to grow. When you demand emotional maturity, consistency, and effort, you are indirectly challenging him to become better. If he fails to meet that challenge and you still stay, the challenge dissolves. But if you leave because he refused to rise, the challenge remains in his mind. And here's where love deepens. When respect increases, attraction often follows. He may begin to see you differently, not just as someone who loved him, but as someone with standards, discipline, and emotional control. Those qualities command admiration. You cannot have deep love without admiration. You cannot admire someone you believe will accept anything. But you can deeply admire someone who holds themselves to a high standard and refuses to settle beneath it. Boundaries also remove imbalance. If the relationship dynamic leaned heavily on you adjusting and him remaining the same, your departure resets the scale. It forces him to see that partnership requires mutual effort. Loss has a way of waking a man up in ways comfort never could. When everything is stable, when you are there every day loving him, supporting him, forgiving him, he can drift through the relationship without fully confronting himself. He can delay growth. He can postpone change. He can assume time is unlimited. But when you're gone, time suddenly feels very real. And that's when something inside him shifts. When a man loses a woman who truly added value to his life, he doesn't just feel sadness. He feels disruption. His routines change. His emotional safety changes. The person he relied on sometimes without realizing it is no longer there to soften the world for him. And now he has to face life without that support system. Maturity doesn't grow in ease. It grows in discomfort. When he feels the absence of your encouragement, he starts recognizing how much you carried emotionally. When he has to sit alone with his thoughts, he starts replaying moments he once dismissed, arguments he brushed off, feelings he minimized, effort he delayed. He may start noticing patterns in himself. Maybe he avoids difficult conversations. Maybe he shuts down emotionally. Maybe he assumed you would always forgive him. When you were there, those habits didn't feel urgent to fix. Now, without you, those same habits feel heavier because now he sees the consequence attached to them. If he treated you casually and lost you, the equation becomes clear. If he ignored your needs and now feels your absence, the cause and effect becomes undeniable. That awareness is painful, but pain is often the catalyst for growth. Men are not immune to regret. In fact, regret can sit deeply in a man's chest once pride fades. At first, he might protect his ego. He might say, it is what it is. He might pretend it doesn't hurt as much as it does. But when the silence stretches, when the loneliness lingers, when the excitement of distractions fades, the reality settles in. That realization pushes him to ask harder questions. Why did I think she would always stay? Why didn't I listen more carefully? Why did I take so long to change? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they are transformative. When he accepts that his choices contributed to losing you, he moves from victim mindset to accountability mindset. That shift is maturity. Instead of blaming circumstances, he begins evaluating himself. Instead of focusing on what you did wrong, he focuses on what he failed to do right. Last also teaches value through contrast. When he interacts with other women, he may notice differences, not in looks, not in surface traits, but in depth, in loyalty, in emotional intelligence. He may realize that what you offered wasn't common. It wasn't easily replaceable. Humility is a major step in emotional development. When a man humbles himself enough to admit he mishandles something good, he begins evolving. He becomes more intentional, more aware, more careful with future connections. There's also something powerful about having to sit with unresolved feelings. When a relationship ends before he fully processed its value, the unfinished emotional business lingers. That lingering feeling forces introspection. It pushes him to understand what love actually requires. He may start recognizing that love isn't just chemistry. It's consistency. It's communication. It's sacrifice. It's showing up even when it's inconvenient. And maybe he didn't fully grasp that while you were there. But losing you highlights the gaps in his understanding. He may remember times you asked for small changes, more time, more effort, more reassurance. Requests that felt minor in the moment now feel significant because he sees that those small changes could have preserved something big. And through that process, he becomes more emotionally intelligent. He starts paying attention to patterns in his behavior. He might work on communication. He might become more expressive. He might become more proactive in future relationships. That transformation often stems from one realization. I don't want to lose something valuable like that again. Not all men evolve immediately. Growth can be gradual. But the seed is planted in the moment of loss. The seed of awareness, the seed of accountability, the seed of deeper understanding about what partnership truly means. When love is present without the threat of loss, it can feel secure but underdeveloped. When love is tested by loss, its depth becomes clearer. He may recognize that what he felt wasn't temporary attachment. It was something deeper that he didn't nurture properly. He doesn't just miss you. He understands you differently. He sees the strength you had, the patience you showed, the standards you maintained. And in seeing that clearly, his respect increases alongside his love. Mature love is different from comfortable love. Comfortable love is easygoing, assumed, sometimes passive. Mature love is intentional. It is aware of fragility. It understands that effort must be continuous. It values what it has because it knows what it feels like to lose it. That truth can either harden him or refine him, but for many it refines. It shapes them into someone more prepared, more attentive, more capable of sustaining deep connection. When he finally matures, when he finally connects effort with love, when he finally understands that a valuable woman is not guaranteed, his perspective changes permanently.